When most people think of the Super Nintendo, they think of action, explosion, lasers, speed, stuff that gets your heart rate up. But every now and then you stumble across a game that slows things down. A game that doesn't want to punish you or stress you out, it just wants you to exist for a while. That's what this list is all about. The Super Nintendo games that help you breathe, think, and maybe even zone out for a bit. My 10 most relaxing Super Nintendo games. Let's begin. We're starting off with one that's kind of incredibly weird, but equally relaxing, and that is Aerobiz Supersonic. This game was created by Koei, who was known for long, drawn-out, and in some cases just boring turn-based strategy games that could easily take upwards of 10 hours or even longer to beat, and for a long time, that's all I associated Koei with. Then I ran across this one. Breaking from the usual formula of turn-based strategy games, this one is a business simulator, one of the few that I know of from retro gaming history. It's the follow-up to Aerobiz, also on the Super Nintendo, and we play as a CEO who has to compete with 3 other airlines for global dominance. We'll do that by buying new routes, buying businesses to boost our own business, and managing tons of different resources. There's no combat, no real danger, just slow, methodical decision-making. You're watching the world grow one route at a time, and it's the kind of game you sip coffee to, not chug energy drinks. The soundtrack hums along in the background and you get lost in the charts and numbers like some sort of air travel Zen master. It's Capitalism Therapy 101. There was one more game in the series known as Air Management 96, but it never made it here. Ever heard of Maxis? They decided one day in 1989 to create one of the greatest games in my opinion, SimCity, a simple city-building simulation game created by Will Wright, who was inspired while editing levels for Raid on Bungling Bay. He found that it was oddly satisfying to create things like cities, so he brushed up on some urban development knowledge and boom, SimCity was born. Now what was magical is that Maxis took 3 letters from that game and made a shit ton of games that involved it, that word being Sim. Their most successful game being The Sims, which for a long time was the highest selling game, selling to the tune of 50 million units sold. But after the success of SimCity, they branched off to make other sim-related games like this one, SimAnt. The whole game involves the simulation of being in an ant colony, we're the black ants, and our job is to take on the red ants with the sole intention of spreading throughout the entire garden. When we manage to do that, then it's time to take on the humans. This was different for 1993, and it's a testament to the creativity of people from that era. Anything could be a video game, and unlike the mistakes of the early 80s, the early 90s was a breeding ground for fun ideas. In the game, you dig tunnels, find food, and occasionally nibble a human's toe just for fun. There's something oddly peaceful about the smallness of it all. The Super Nintendo version especially does tend to run slower and has this muted palette that makes it feel like you're watching an old nature documentary, but when you're tired of conquering the galaxy, conquering the backyard, it feels just right. You're going to see the word sim a lot because those games are designed, at least in my opinion, to be relaxing. At its core, everything is based on your own decision. That's the case for this one. We're simulating an entire ass planet. We can control and manipulate the atmosphere, temperature, land masses, we can create life, we can destroy life, and ultimately we can develop a society to a point where they're capable of leaving Earth after becoming an advanced civilization. And this cycle continues over and over all the way until the end of the planet's life, where the sun becomes a red giant and destroys everything. There's scenarios and tons of things to do, but understand, this game is not easy. In fact, it's got a little bit of a learning curve, but to me it's the ultimate God mode chill session. Sure, you could cause mass extinction, but you don't have to. You could just watch your world evolve. It's the kind of game that rewards curiosity instead of aggression. You'll find yourself adjusting a slider, leaning back, and watching a civilization rise from amoebas all the way to astronauts. It's slow and it's clunky, but to me it's pure SNES meditation. Now this is a great game. I remember playing the hell out of this in the arcades. Some of you might know this as Puzzle Bobble, and if you know the term bobble, you've probably played Bubble Bobble, which was a huge deal in its own way. One of the most well-known Taito IPs out there. In fact, there were a few different spin-offs. The main series was Bubble Bobble, which has about 9 games, but there was also Rainbow Islands, which had 5 games as well. Here we are with Bust-A-Move, and I know it's named differently, that's just what it was called outside of Japan, and Bust-A-Move has over 15 games. So in some ways I feel this is the more fun, more well-known franchise from Taito. It's a very simple game. You launch colored bubbles to the top using your pointer to guide where the bubble will land. You have to clear the bubbles to beat the stage. It's very addicting, and to me, I do feel like it is one of the better games on the Super Nintendo, but it can get tricky. And you know what? That's fine. All games should have some level of difficulty, and for an arcade to Super Nintendo conversion, this is a solid game. The most recent Bust-A-Move game was Bust-A-Move Universe for the 3DS, and it's trash! So enjoy this older one. Trust me. For as long as I've known Kirby as a franchise, it's always been a platformer, so imagine me as a kid seeing a Kirby game and having it be centered around mini-golf. That was awesome. This game does have some interesting history though. It was originally supposed to be called Super T Golf. The only focus was going to be on the mini-golf aspect. But Hal, being Hal, decided that Kirby could make this project work. And for many of us in the 90s, it did. Our whole job is to whack Kirby around a course until we find the exit hole. And we have a limited number of strokes. We can manipulate the power, angle, and even our spin if we want to try to take out some enemies on the way to the hole. We can also use abilities such as the copy ability. It's one of the many different abilities Kirby has. With 8 courses of 8 levels each, this is a wacky and fun game that after getting your amygdala ripped to shreds by Contra 3, you can sit down and actually enjoy. Now, this one's deceptive for a few reasons. First off, it's not really a Tetris game, it's Panel de Pon, which is like a jewel clearing game. The second is that at high speeds, Tetris Attack can get intense, but played slowly, it is sort of hypnotic. The music loops are bouncy and relaxing, the sound effects are satisfying, and there's this rhythmic flow when you start chaining blocks together. It's one of those games where time just kind of disappears. You start playing for a few minutes and suddenly multiple hours have passed. It's perfect when you want to focus without feeling tense, and honestly, Yoshi's cheerful face doesn't really hurt either. You might know this as being part of the Puzzle League line of games because ultimately it's not Tetris. Panel de Pon sounds stupid as hell, so let's just call it Puzzle League. In fact, the first game I played in this franchise was Pokemon Puzzle League on the Nintendo 64. It was one of my first Blockbuster rentals that I can remember. But if you want to check out more of this franchise, the most recent game was Planet Puzzle League on the DS. I hate seeing legacy franchises go to the handheld spectrum to die, but sometimes it happens. Well, if you've watched my videos in the past, you already know that I'm not a huge fan of Secret of Mana. There are elements of it that infuriate me to no end, but at the end of the day, it is a very cozy game through and through. It was different, because as a Square game, it broke away from the traditional action RPG formula. Instead of the usual turn-based grind, Secret of Mana gave players a real-time combat system that felt alive, at least when it wasn't tripping over its own feet. The ring menus were innovative, the soundtrack was magical, and the world had this gentle, dreamlike quality that made you want to wonder just for the sake of it. But for every serene forest and charming NPC, there's a hit detection issue or an AI companion getting stuck behind a tree, reminding you why therapy is important. Still, despite its flaws, Secret of Mana nails that sense of adventure and warmth that few games from the era could match. But I digress. My personal complaints aside, I do think that from all of the RPGs and even action RPGs on the Super Nintendo, this is 100% a relaxing game, and I attribute that to the vibrant art and the phenomenal music. The most recent Mana game was Adventures of Mana in 2016 for mobile platforms. I mean, if you don't mess with phone games, then Children of Mana on the Nintendo DS is what you're gonna play. Again, I can't control the weather, shit ends up on the DS. Before Stardew Valley made cozy farming a lifestyle, there was Harvest Moon. It's just you, a farm, and a few crops standing between success and starvation. No magic swords, no world-ending prophecy, just dirt, sweat, and maybe a cow that likes you if you remember to feed it. It's slow in the best way possible. You wake up, water your plants, feed your animals, head into town, and maybe finish off the day at a festival or on a date with someone you've been awkwardly giving turnips to for a month straight. What makes Harvest Moon special is that it doesn't rush you. It teaches patience. Progress isn't measured in levels or loot drops. It's in how green your fields look at sunrise or how much the locals start to smile when you pass by. There's a kind of peace in that repetition, in the way the seasons roll in and out while you quietly build a life from the ground up. And that's the beauty of it. There's no villain, no war, no stress, just you, nature, and the gentle hum of a town that slowly becomes home. It's the Super Nintendo equivalent of lighting a candle, putting on lo-fi music, and journaling about your day. You start to care about the people, the land, the small victories until your little farm feels like an extension of yourself. It's wholesome in a way few games have ever matched. A reminder that sometimes saving the world isn't nearly as satisfying as it is just tending to your own little garden. The most recent game was Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, and it actually came out this year. Might be worth checking out. You could argue Pilotwings is basically a glorified stress test, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes one of the most serene experiences on the Super Nintendo. The music drifts like a summer breeze, the visuals are wide and weightless, and the simple act of soaring through the clouds feels strangely relaxing. It's less about winning and more about the feeling, the gentle tilt of your glider, the slow drift of a parachute, that tiny moment of silence right before you stick the landing, or, if you're me, absolutely eat it. Each mode has its own rhythm. The hand glider feels like freedom, smooth, graceful, and patient, while the rocket belt gives you this clunky, awkward ballet in midair that's equal parts thrilling and terrifying. And when you're skydiving, watching the island grow larger beneath you, there's this quiet sense of wonder that few games from that era really ever captured. There's no combat, no villain, no ticking clock, just you, the open air, and the hum of possibility. Pilotwings takes something as complicated as flight and turns it into a moment of peace, a game that rewards stillness as much as skill. Even when you crash, and believe me, you will crash, it never feels punishing. It feels like it's part of the experience. For a system full of chaos, explosions, and bosses the size of fucking buildings, Pilotwings dared to say, hey, take a breath. Enjoy the view. The most recent game was Pilotwing Resort on the 3DS. Next. And at number 1, the undisputed champion of Super Nintendo relaxation, SimCity. The 16-bit version is pure perfection. From the moment that mellow, jazzy soundtrack kicks in, you know you're in for something special. The pacing is gentle, the visuals are clean, and the city itself feels alive in this cozy, mechanical sort of way. You're not fighting monsters or saving the galaxy, you're just zoning neighborhoods, laying down roads, watching your little world breathe, listening to them bitch about traffic. Again, as we mentioned previously, this game was a result of Will Wright enjoying the level editor aspect for a game that he helped create, Raid on Bungling Bay. He took the time to read books about urban development, and thus SimCity was born. It's very hypnotic. Hours will fly by as you balance residential, commercial, and industrial zones, chasing that perfect skyline. You start small, a few houses, some traffic lights here and there, maybe a little humble power plant buzzing in the corner, and before you know it, you've built a metropolis. A living rhythm of pixels that hums in harmony with your imagination. There's no rush, no timer breathing down your neck, just quiet progress, one square at a time. Even when things go wrong, which they will, a fire will break out, a tornado will drop by uninvited. SimCity never yells at you. I mean, it has an alert sound, but it just shrugs and says, hey, this is part of being in a fucking town, so rebuild it, adjust it, learn from it. It's less about control and more about flow, the calm satisfaction of seeing something you've nurtured grow and thrive. On a console defined by speed and spectacle, SimCity stands tall as the one game that told you to chill the fuck out and just enjoy the city lights. The most recent game was SimCity Complete Edition, which has 2 games and 5 DLC packs, which to me screams tons of replayability. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What are your top 10 most relaxing Super Nintendo games out there? Feel free to let the community know down in the comments section below. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, you'll fit right in. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes, Fortefyre out.